The town of Ostrog, called Ostra by Jews, is situated in the historic region of Volhynia. It was established by the great princes of Kievan Rus and later became a part of the Great Duchy of Lithuania. After the establishment of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 1589, the region was transferred to the Polish crown. In the second partition of Poland in 1793, Ostrog was included in the Russian Empire, where it remained until World War I. Between the two world wars, it was again in the territory of Poland, but was annexed by the Soviet Union. Currently, the town is in the territory of independent Ukraine. Ostrog had one of the most famous and learned Jewish communities in Eastern Europe, and many prominent Talmudic scholars of the 16th and 17th centuries served as its rabbis. One of the most important of them was Rabbi Shmuel Edels, known by the acronym Maharsha. His name is connected with the Great Synagogue in Ostrog. An old legend related that the person who would donate the largest sum of money for the building of the synagogue would have the honor of laying the cornerstone, and the synagogue would bear his name. An anonymous Jew came to the servant of the Maharsha and made the largest offer, but told him that it was his request that the synagogue be named after the Maharsha. Later, the donor explained to the rabbi that he had no children, and he wished to leave all his money to the synagogue. The rabbi blessed him and foretold that he would one day have a son who would be a great Talmudic scholar. Although this legend seems to be imaginary, it indeed points to the time of the erection of the synagogue. Shmuel Edels was the rabbi of Ostrog from 1615 to 1632, and the synagogue, judging from its features, was built in the 1630s. According to the research of Dr. Sergei Kravtsov, the synagogue was probably built by Jakub Madlena, an Italian architect working in Lvov. The core of the Ostrog synagogue is a rectangular structure containing a vestibule on the west and a square prayer hall on the east. 4 massive octagonal pillars divide the prayer hall into 9 equal bays. Such division of space gives the name to this particular type of structure, which is called the 9-bay synagogue. The 4 walls of the synagogue are pierced by 12 windows in accordance with a precept from the Kabbalistic Book of Zohar, which maintains that there should be 12 windows in a synagogue corresponding to the number of tribes of Israel. The large round arch windows are placed high up on the walls. The pillars and pilasters support the transverse arches, which divide between the 9 ribbed groin vaults. The plaster ribs emphasize the actual construction of the vault. Each groin vault is an intersection of 2 tunnel vaults. In the case of Ostrog, these tunnels are not equally shaped. The axis of the longitudinal tunnel is straight, as can be seen in the cross-section, whereas the latitudinal axis is a flat arch. Such a construction underscores the professionalism of the architect. The pillars supporting the vaults are crowned with capitals, which combine a row of acanthus leaves surmounted by a row of étendard motifs and topped by a projecting abacus. Fortunately, these capitals are preserved, allowing for an accurate computer rendering. This special type of capital, found only in the synagogue in Ostrog and in the suburban synagogue in Lvov, suggests that both buildings were designed by the same architect. It is known that the suburban synagogue in Lvov was built in 1624 to 1632, which would indicate a similar date for the Ostrog synagogue. These 4 pillars not only help support the structures spanning the vast space of the prayer hall, they also emphasize the most important place in the synagogue during prayer service, the central octagonal bima from where the Torah was read. The bima was surrounded by a high grillwork fence and was entered by way of 2 side stairways. Another element, whose importance is even greater than that of the bima, is the Aron HaKodesh, the Torah Ark, traditionally situated in the center of the east wall. Fortunately, several archival photographs of the Torah Ark have been preserved, which have allowed for an exact computer reconstruction. The Torah Ark was a 2-tiered portal-like structure, which was accessed through a narrow stairway. Cornices on both tiers were supported by 2 pairs of columns. Rich wooden, gilded carvings decorated the structure. Usually, the window above the Torah ark was smaller than other windows in the building and was incorporated into the structure of the ark, as in this example from Staro-Konstantinov. The Ostrog Synagogue is the only known example where the central window had the same form and dimensions as other windows in the building, so that the elaborate wooden decorations of the Torah ark screened the window and the sunlight filtered through its openwork carvings. The Torah ark on the east, the bima in the center, and the entrance to the hall on the west wall formed the main axis of the building. The Ostrog Synagogue is an excellent example of a 9-base synagogue. The first appearance of this type of synagogue was most likely the suburban synagogue in Lvov, which was destroyed during World War II. The Ostrog Synagogue was probably the second building of this type and the earliest example still standing. According to the research of Dr. Sergei Kravtsov, the 9-base scheme originates from the famous reconstruction of the Jerusalem Temple made by Juan Bautista Villalpando in his book In Ezequielem Explanaciones. This work was published in Rome in 1604 and had considerable influence on Polish architecture. Villalpando thought that the temple had 9 equal courtyards and the scheme resembled the heavenly order. Since the Lvov and Ostrog synagogues were built by a Christian architect, it is reasonable to assume that he had this scheme in mind. On the exterior, the northeast and southeast corners of the building were supported by clasping buttresses. There are 2 buttresses situated in the center of the west facade. The main entrance to the synagogue was moved from the central axis, as in many other synagogues of this period. The building was crowned by a high attic wall. Its north and south sides were modestly decorated, while the west and east sides were very elaborate. They were composed of a row of pilasters flanking fields with radiating lines and topped by a gable with a carved silhouette. The center-peaked roof allowed for the efficient runoff of snow and rain, preventing damage to the building. In the late 18th century, the growth of the community brought about changes to the synagogue building. A new extension was built along the north side of the original structure. Its main purpose was to house 2 women's sections on the first and the second floors. The original large windows on the north wall of the prayer hall were bricked up, and 2 rows of small windows were made to allow the women to listen to the prayer service. These new windows were made in such a way that they did not damage the pilasters which bore the weight of the vaults. This accounts for their irregular shape. At the same time, the roof was changed into a simple gable roof, thereby eliminating the attic walls on the north and south. The attic wall and the gable on the east side were simplified. Only that on the west retained its decorative features, and this facade became the west facade of the new extension was also emphasized architecturally. It had a small attic wall and 2 pilasters. In the 18th century, due to increasing diversity in the communities, different groups started to establish their own synagogues. Often, these synagogues were situated in the auxiliary rooms of the great synagogues, as can be seen in Ostrog. Here, the synagogue of the Hever Kadisha, or Burial Society, was situated on the first floor. The rag merchants and porters prayed on the second floor, and the synagogue of the butchers, called Zivchei Tzedek, was located in the west part of the new extension. During the Russian-Polish War of 1792, the synagogue and the community were miraculously saved when the Russian army under the command of the famous general Alexander Suvorov besieged Ostrog. Jews, fearing combat in the streets, gathered in the synagogue. The Russians thought that the synagogue was a fortress and bombarded it with cannon fire for 2 days. However, as a legend relates, all the cannonballs entering through the windows remained suspended in air, and only 1 ball managed to hit the southern wall. On the 3rd day, a brave Jew succeeded in reaching the Russians and told them that the Poles had withdrawn from the town. This day, the 7th of Tammuz, became a local holiday equal to Purim. In memory of the miraculous rescue, the spot on the southern facade where the cannonball hit was not plastered during renovations, and another cannonball was hung from the ceiling of the prayer hall. At the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, the synagogue underwent minor changes, the most significant being the addition of an exterior balcony on the northern extension. Along with the construction of this balcony, a new tradition appeared. On the holiday of Simchat Torah, the rabbi stood on the balcony and threw apples to the public. In 1912, a major renovation was undertaken. As a result, the pediment of the northern addition was remodeled to look like the pediment of the main volume, and its west facade was treated with paint to achieve a rustical effect. The other facades were plastered, except for the place on the south facade, which was hit by a Russian cannonball. In the interior, the central bay above the bima was painted with floral motifs, and the capitals were colored. Other surfaces were left blank. At the beginning of the war between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, heavy fighting took place in the town of Ostrog. As a result, the synagogue was severely damaged. In the post-war era, the damaged parts of the building were removed and only the core of the prayer hall remained intact. The building was used as a pharmaceutical storage space and its interior was divided into 3 floors. Fortunately, the 4 columns with the decorated capitals were preserved. In the past few years, these floors were removed, so one can again see the prayer hall in all its glory.